50 rifles. One girl, Dawn, bleeding across the Arizona sky. Clara Whitmore stood in the center of Dust Creek Square, a crimson silk ribbon wrapped around her shoulders like war paint. Her hands trembled, but her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "He's my husband. Shoot me first." On the gallows behind her, Neshoba hung in chains, blood dripping from his split lip. His dark eyes found hers across the crowd, not pleading, but accepting. The noose swayed in the morning wind. Sheriff Hayes raised his hand. 50 soldiers tightened their fingers on triggers. The town held its breath. Clara didn't move, didn't blink. The silk ribbon fluttered against her chest, still stained with dried blood, not hers, not his, but a ghost's. "Last chance, girl," Hayes growled. "Step aside." She took one step forward instead. 3 months ago. She didn't even know his name. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 months earlier, Dust Creek had been dying slowly, like everything else in the Arizona Territory. The town clung to life around Whitmore's Inn, the only place for 60 miles with clean water and a roof that didn't leak when the rains came. Clara Whitmore ran the place alone most days, her father too weak to climb the stairs anymore. Samuel Whitmore coughed into his handkerchief again, hiding it before Clara could see the blood. 55 years old and already a ghost. The sickness had started in his lungs 6 months ago, spreading like wildfire through dry brush. He had maybe 3 months left, maybe less. What terrified him more than dying was leaving Clara alone. The ledger on his desk told a story more brutal than any disease. $3,000 owed to the bank, another $2,000 to suppliers. And then there was Red Hawk's gang, circling like vultures, waiting for him to fail so they could pick the bones clean. They'd already made their intentions clear: pay up or disappear. Clara would be on her own with men like that in a lawless town. She didn't know any of it. Samuel had made sure of that. Every night after she fell asleep, he sat at his desk, moving numbers round like puzzle pieces that never quite fit. There was no solution, no way out, except one. The memory came to him unbidden, sharp as broken glass. 10 years ago, bleeding out on the desert floor while 3 men rifled through his pockets. Then the arrows, swift and slant. 3 bodies hitting the dust, a hand reaching down, dark-skinned and strong, a voice speaking broken English. "You live now. You owe blood." Samuel had never forgotten the Apache chief who saved him, had never forgotten his son, either the young warrior who'd carried Samuel 3 miles to safety on his back that night. Samuel wrote a letter by candlelight. His hand shook as he sealed it. The reply came a week later, delivered by a shadow that appeared and vanished before dawn. Samuel met the man outside, away from Clara's window. Neshoba stood taller than Samuel remembered, lean and hard as the desert itself. His eyes held the same quiet intensity as his father's. "My daughter," Samuel said, his voice barely a whisper, "when I'm gone, she'll have nothing, no protection. Those men will—" Neshoba raised a hand. "I remember what you did for my father, for me. I'm asking you to protect her. However you can, I'll give you everything, the inn, the land, the water rights, all of it. Just keep her safe." Neshoba looked toward the inn's lit window where Clara's shadow moved behind the curtain. She must agree. "She will," Samuel lied. "I'll make sure of it." He didn't mention marriage, didn't explain the arrangement fully, because if he did, He might lose his nerve, and Clara's life depended on his courage to deceive her one last time. Samuel waited until after supper to tell her. Clara was washing dishes, humming something her mother used to sing. When he cleared his throat, the sound made her turn. "There's a man," he said, "a businessman from out west. He's offered to marry you." The plate slipped from her fingers, clattering in the basin. "What? He can pay off our debts, all of them, and he'll protect you from Red Hawk's men." Samuel kept his eyes on the table, unable to meet her gaze. "It's a good arrangement, Clara. He's educated, respectable. You'll want for nothing." Clara's hands dripped soapy water onto the floor. "You're selling me?" "I'm saving you." His voice cracked. "When I'm gone, you'll have no one. Those men will come for you, for this place. I can't let that happen." She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, but the exhaustion in her father's face stopped her. The way he leaned against the table to stay upright, the blood-stained handkerchief barely hidden in his pocket. He was dying, and he was terrified. "How much time do I have?" she whispered. 2 weeks. Clara closed her eyes. 19 years old and already a commodity, already something to be traded for safety and solvency. But wasn't that how it always was for women in the territory? At least her father was trying to choose someone decent, someone educated, someone who could protect her. "What's his name?" she asked. Samuel hesitated just a fraction too long. Does it matter? It should have been her first warning. The wedding dress had belonged to her mother. Clara found it wrapped in tissue paper at the bottom of the trunk, smelling faintly of lavender and dust. It fit perfectly. Cream-colored lace over simple cotton. The kind of dress a woman wore when she married for love. Clara buttoned it with shaking fingers, watching her reflection in the cracked mirror. She looked like a stranger, like a sacrifice dressed for ceremony. Samuel drove the wagon in silence. They passed through town without stopping, taking the old mining road that led into the foothills. Clara's stomach twisted with each mile. Why weren't they marrying in the church? Why no guests? Where were they going? "Papa," she started, but he shook his head. "Trust me. Clara, please." They stopped at a small wooden cabin an hour outside Dust Creek. It sat alone in a clearing, backed by red rocks and juniper trees. No smoke from the chimney, no horses tied outside. Just one man standing at the window with his back to the door, shoulders broad beneath a dark shirt. Samuel helped Clara down from the wagon, his hands trembling. "May God forgive me," he whispered. She didn't hear him. Her eyes were fixed on the cabin door, on the future waiting inside, on the stranger who would become her husband without even the courtesy of facing her first. "Go on," Samuel said gently. "I'll wait here." Clara gathered her skirt and walked toward the door. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The man at the window didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her entrance, just stood there, perfectly still, as if carved from stone. "Hello," she said. Her voice sounded small in the empty cabin. The man turned. Clara's breath stopped. He wasn't white, wasn't anything close to the educated businessman her father had described. He was Apache. She knew it instantly from his features, his long dark hair, the way he moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd never lived between walls. Bronze skin, sharp cheekbones, eyes like black glass that seemed to see straight through her. She took a step backward, then another. "This is a mistake," she stammered. Your husband," Neshoba said. His English was perfect, unaccented, which somehow made everything worse. "If you choose to be," my father said, "he said you were a businessman, a white man. He lied." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. She spun toward the door, ready to run, but Neshoba's voice stopped her. "He didn't lie. He protected you the only way he knew how." Clara turned back slowly. "Protect, is that what you call this? Tricking me into marrying a—" She caught herself, but the unspoken word hung between them anyway. Savage. Neshoba's expression didn't change. "Your father saved my father's life 10 years ago. We owe him a blood debt. I'm here to honor that debt, to keep you safe when he's gone." Safe. Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Or owned." "There's a difference," Neshoba said quietly. "I'm offering protection, not possession." He reached behind him and lifted a small wooden box from the window ledge. It was beautifully carved, every surface covered in intricate patterns that must have taken months to create. He held it out to her. "This is yours. Open it when you decide what you want. Not now. When you're ready." Clara stared at the box, at his steady hands, at his face, which showed neither anger nor disappointment at her reaction, just patience. Terrible, infinite patience. "I don't want your gifts," she said. "It's not a gift, it's a choice." He set the box on the table between them. "Your father asked me to protect you. I will. But you don't have to marry me to have that protection. You don't have to stay. You don't have to do anything except survive." "What if I leave right now? Then I'll make sure Red Hawk's men never touch you. I'll make sure you have money to start somewhere new. I'll make sure you're free." He paused. "That's what your father paid for, your freedom, not your servitude." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to hate him, wanted to hate her father, wanted to hate everyone who'd brought her to this moment. But all she felt was crushing, suffocating fear. Fear of being alone, fear of Red Hawk, fear of this strange man who spoke like a scholar and looked like everything she'd been taught to fear. "I need to think," she whispered. Neshoba nodded once. "Take all the time you need." Clara grabbed her skirt and ran from the cabin, past her father's startled face, past the wagon. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, collapsing in the red dirt, with her mother's wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The sun beat down mercilessly, and somewhere in the distance a hawk screamed. She'd been sold to an Apache. Her father was dying, and nothing would ever be the same again. Clara stumbled back to the inn after dark, her mother's dress torn and dust-stained. Samuel was waiting on the porch, hunched over in his chair like a question mark. When he saw her face, something inside him seemed to collapse. "Clara, how could you?" The words ripped from her throat. "How could you sell me to a savage?" Samuel flinched, as if she'd struck him. "He's not—" "Don't." Clara climbed the porch steps, trembling with fury and heartbreak. "Don't you dare defend this. You lied to me. You said he was educated, respectable. You didn't mention he was Apache." "He is educated," Samuel said quietly, "raised by missionaries." After, he broke off, coughing, once, twice. His whole body convulsed with it. Clara watched him fold over, watched him gasp for air, and felt her anger war with terror. When he finally straightened, there was blood on his lips, bright red against death-pale skin. "Papa," she whispered. Samuel wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, leaving a crimson smear. "I'm dying, Clara. We both know it. And when I'm gone, you'll have nothing, no money, no protection. Red Hawk's men will come for you. They'll take this place and everything else." His voice cracked. "I couldn't let that happen. I had to find someone who could keep you safe. So you chose an Indian." The word came out harsh, ugly. Clara hated herself for saying it, but fear made her cruel. "I chose the man who saved my life." Samuel gripped the armrest of his chair, pulling himself upright. 10 years ago, I was hauling supplies through the territory. 3 men ambushed me on the road. They took everything, my money, my wagon, my horse. They were going to kill me just for sport. Clara had heard this story before, but Samuel had always glossed over the details, had always said someone helped him, never specified who. "I was on the ground, bleeding, when the arrows came, swift and silent. All 3 men dropped before they could draw their guns." Samuel's eyes went distant, remembering. "Then he was there, an Apache chief named Delson. He could have left me to die. Should have, probably. White men had killed his people, taken his land. But he didn't. He stopped the bleeding. His son, Nashoba, carried me 3 miles to a trading post. The name settled between them. Nashoba, the man in the cabin, the stranger who'd looked at her with such terrible patience. I owe them a blood debt." "Clara, when Delson's son agreed to honor his father's sacrifice by protecting you, I thanked God, because there's no one else I trust, no one else strong enough to stand against what's coming. But he's—" Clara stopped. What was she going to say? That he was different, that the color of his skin or the way he lived made him less worthy of trust than the white men in town who'd let her father drown in debt, than the sheriff who took bribes from Red Hawk's gang. He's a good man. Samuel finished for her, better than most I've known, and he's asking nothing from you except a chance. He reached for her hand. "Give him that. Clara, give him one chance. For me." Clara pulled away. "I can't believe you're asking me this. I'm asking you to survive." Samuel's breathing had turned ragged. "That's all I've ever asked." She left him on the porch and went inside. Climbing the stairs to her room with leaden feet, she didn't sleep, just sat by the window, watching the moon trace silver across the desert, wondering how her life had turned into something she didn't recognize. When dawn came, she heard the thud. Samuel lay crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, one hand still clutching the banister. Blood trickled from his mouth, staining the floorboards dark. His eyes found hers as she ran down, and something like relief crossed his face. "Papa, no, no, please." Clara knelt beside him, cradling his head in her lap. His skin felt like ice. "Listen," he wheezed. "Red Hawk, 3 days. They'll come. Don't talk. Save your strength. No strength left." His fingers found hers, gripping weakly. "Your mother, she never got to choose. Her father married her off to me, sight unseen. She was brave, so brave. But she never got to be free." His breathing hitched. "Don't be like her. Don't just survive. Live, Clara. Live the way she couldn't." "I will, Papa. I promise. but you have to hold on. Give him a chance, Samuel whispered. His eyes were already glazing over, looking past her to something she couldn't see. He's not what you think. None of us are. Then he was gone, just like that. One moment, her father, the next, just a body growing cold in her arms. Clara sat there for hours, unable to move, unable to process the fact that she was alone now. Truly, completely alone. When she finally found the strength to stand, her legs nearly gave out. She washed his body herself, dressed him in his Sunday clothes, wrapped him in clean linen. She expected someone from town to come, someone to help, to offer condolences, to acknowledge that Samuel Whitmore had been part of this community for 20 years. No one came. By afternoon, the whispers had already started. She heard them through the window as people passed on the street, conspired with the Apache, sold his daughter to savages, got what he deserved. Clara dug the grave herself in the small plot behind the inn. Rain beginning to fall as she worked. The earth was hard and unforgiving. Her hands blistered. Her back screamed, but she kept digging, because what else could she do? She buried her father alone in a downpour. No words, no ceremony, just the sound of rain hammering the ground and her own choked sobs. When she finally stumbled back inside, soaked and shaking, 3 men were waiting on the porch, Red Hawk's men. She recognized them by their red bandanas and the casual cruelty in their eyes. "Heard your daddy died," the tallest one said, picking his teeth with a knife. "Real shame." "Course. That means his debts fall to you now." Clara's hand tightened on the shovel. "I don't have any money. We know." He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. "But this place is worth something. The land, the water rights. We'll take it as payment. This is my home." "Not anymore it ain't. You got 3 days to clear out. After that, we burn it down with or without you inside." He tipped his hat mockingly. 3 days, sweetheart. Use them wisely." They left her standing in the rain, trembling with exhaustion and terror. 3 days, alone, no money, no protection, nowhere to go. Clara went inside, and Tepat sat at her father's desk, staring at the ledgers that had consumed his final months, at the debts that had killed him as surely as the disease in his lungs, at the impossible weight of survival pressing down on her shoulders. Then she remembered the cabin, the patient eyes, the carved wooden box. "He will protect you," her father had said. Clara didn't want to go back, didn't want to accept what it meant. But what choice did she have? Red Hawk's men would take everything, would maybe take more than everything. At least Nashoba had given her a choice. At dawn, she saddled her father's horse and rode out alone toward the foothills, not because she loved him, not because she trusted him, but because drowning men don't refuse rope, even when it's offered by unfamiliar hands. Survival didn't care about pride, and Clara had run out of everything except the will to live. The Apache village sat in a canyon Clara had never known existed, hidden behind red rock formations that looked like the bones of ancient giants. As her horse picked its way down the narrow trail, she saw smoke rising from dome-shaped dwellings, children playing near a stream, women tending fires. It looked nothing like the war camps she'd imagined. It looked like home. Nashoba waited at the edge of the village. He didn't smile when he saw her, but something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe or relief. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Clara dismounted, her legs unsteady. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." He took her horse's reins. "You chose survival, Liz. That's not weakness." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion weighed her down like stones. She'd ridden through the night, hadn't eaten since before her father died, could barely stand upright. Neshoba's hand steadied her elbow when she swayed. "Come," he said quietly. "You need rest." The village watched her pass. Clara felt their eye curious, wary, some openly hostile. She was white. She was the enemy. She was everything they'd been taught to fear, just as they were everything she'd been taught to fear. The irony wasn't lost on her. Neshoba led her to a dwelling set slightly apart from the others. It was small but carefully maintained, with woven mats on the floor and a sleeping pallet in the corner. A fire pit sat cold in the center. "This is yours," Neshoba said. "No one will enter without permission, not even me." Clara stared at him. "I don't understand. You thought you would be a prisoner." "It wasn't a question. You thought I'd claim you like property. Use you." Heat flooded her face. That was exactly what she'd thought. Neshoba set her saddlebag down by the entrance. "This is not a cage. Clara, this is safety. You can leave whenever you want. Go back to town. Go somewhere else entirely. I'll give you money, supplies, protection for the journey. But while you're here, you're under my protection. That means no one touches you, no one harms you, not even me. Then what do you want from me? Nothing." He moved toward the door. "When you're ready to decide what happens next, we'll talk. Until then, rest. Where will you sleep?" The question came out before she could stop it. Neshoba gestured outside. "There, where I can make sure you feel safe." He left before she could respond. Through the gap in the entrance, Clara watched him settle against a nearby boulder, his back to her dwelling, keeping watch, guarding her from the world, guarding her from himself. She didn't sleep that first night, just sat on the pallet, watching shadows move across the walls, waiting for something terrible that never came. The days that followed blurred together in ways Clara couldn't have predicted. Neshoba kept his word. He didn't touch her, didn't demand anything, didn't even speak to her unless she spoke first. But he was always there, a quiet, steady presence at the edge of her vision. He taught her things without asking if she wanted to learn. How to sit a horse properly so her back wouldn't ache after an hour. How to track animals by their prints in the dust. How to identify which plants could heal and which could kill. How to move through the desert without leaving traces. "Why are you teaching me this?" Clara asked one afternoon, sweat dripping down her temples as she tried and failed to string a bow properly. "Because knowledge is freedom," Neshoba said, adjusting her grip. "You can't choose what you don't understand." The Apache women watched them with expressions Clara couldn't read. Some brought her food, dried meat, corn cakes, bitter tea that settled her stomach. Others kept their distance, their faces hard with old grief. Clara didn't blame them. She knew what white people had done to them, the massacres, the broken treaties, the stolen children. She was the face of their enemy, living among them, and yet no one heard her. One evening, Clara sat near the central fire, watching families gather for the evening meal. A little girl ran past, chasing a dog, laughing with pure unself-conscious joy. An old man carved wood by firelight, his hand steady despite his age. Two young men argued good-naturedly about whose arrow had killed the elk they'd brought back. They weren't savages. They were just people. People with families and traditions and humor and grief. People who loved their children and honored their elders and told stories around fires. Everything Clara had been taught was a lie. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks. Each day, another piece of her old understanding crumbled. Each conversation, another assumption proven false. Nashoba read. That was perhaps the strangest discovery. Late one night, unable to sleep, Clara emerged from her dwelling to find him sitting by a small fire, a book open on his lap. She moved closer, curiosity overcoming caution. "What are you reading?" He looked up, startled. "Shakespeare, The Tempest." Clara stared. "Where did you learn English to read?" "Missionaries found me when I was 12. After the soldiers came." His voice was neutral, but something dark flickered behind his eyes. "They taught me their language, their God, their books. They wanted to civilize me, turn me white inside, if not outside. Did it work? No." Nashoba closed the book gently. "But I kept the knowledge anyway. Knowledge isn't good or evil. It's just a tool. How you use it matters." He read to her sometimes after that. His voice was low and steady, turning Shakespeare's words into something almost like music. Clara would sit across the fire, listening, watching the way firelight played across his features, trying to reconcile this man who quoted poetry with everything she'd been taught about his people. It was easier when she thought of him as a monster, safer, because monsters couldn't break your heart. 3 weeks after she arrived, Clara finally opened the wooden box. She'd carried it with her from the cabin, tucked in her saddlebag, unable to throw it away, but too afraid to look inside. But tonight, alone in her dwelling, with moonlight streaming through the smoke hole, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a piece of red silk, folded carefully, so old the edges had begun to fray, and beneath it a letter written in careful script. Clara's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. "Freedom is not given by others. Only those who dare to love have it. This silk belonged to my mother. She died protecting me from soldiers when I was 12 years old. She wrapped it around my shoulders as she fell and told me to run. I have carried it ever since, a reminder of what it means to love someone more than yourself. I give it to you now because I understand that kind of love. Your father had it for you, Vic. My mother had it for me. It is the only thing worth giving us. But you don't have to accept it. You don't have to accept me. The choice is yours, and always will be, Nashoba." The silk unfurled in her hands, impossibly soft despite its age. Clara held it to her face and breathed in. It smelled like sage and smoke and something deeper she couldn't name, like memory, like grief. She thought of her own mother, dead in childbirth, of her father bleeding out at the bottom of the stairs, of Nashoba's mother falling with arrows in her back so her son could live. All that loss, all that sacrifice, all that desperate, ferocious love that demanded nothing in return except survival. Clara cried then, not the harsh, broken sobs of the past weeks, but something quieter, something that felt almost like healing. She wrapped the red silk around her shoulders and lay down, pulling it close like an embrace. For the first time since her father died, she slept through the night. When she emerged the next morning, Neshoba was already awake, tending the fire. He glanced up as she approached, and his eyes went to the silk ribbon she'd wound through her hair. He didn't say anything, didn't smile, but the tension in his shoulders eased just slightly. And Clara understood she'd made her choice. Not marriage, not yet, but something else, something that felt like the first step toward trust. "Teach me to shoot," Clara said. Neshoba stood, nodding once. "First, you learn to breathe," and so she did. She learned to breathe, to aim, to wait for the perfect moment between heartbeats when everything went still and clear. She learned the language of the desert, the rhythm of the seasons, the names of stars she'd never noticed before. She learned that Neshoba was patient beyond measure, that he laughed rarely but deeply, that he had nightmares sometimes and would wake gasping, reaching for weapons that weren't there, that he loved his people with a fierce, protective devotion that made Clara's chest ache. She learned that freedom wasn't about where you lived or who you lived with. It was about choosing to stay when you could leave, and slowly, carefully, without either of them quite meaning to. Clara learned what it felt like to fall in love. The night air carried the scent of juniper smoke and something sweeter, wild sage crushing beneath their feet as Clara and Neshoba walked the perimeter of the sleeping village. It had become their ritual. These quiet walks after the fires dimmed and the children settled into dreams, a space where words came easier in darkness. "Tell me about her," Clara said softly. "Your mother?" Neshoba was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then she sang, even when there was nothing to sing about, even when soldiers came and the world turned to ash. She sang. Clara thought of her own mother, a woman she'd never known except through her father's stories. Two women, so different, both gone too soon, both leaving children to navigate a world that didn't want them. They stopped at the canyon's edge where the land dropped away into darkness. Stars blazed overhead. So many Clara couldn't have counted them if she'd tried. Neshoba turned to her, and in the moonlight his face looked softer than she'd ever seen it. "You smiled today," he said, "when you beat me at tracking the deer." Clara felt his heat rise to her cheeks. "I was lucky." "You were good." His hand found hers, cautious, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "You're becoming something you weren't before, something stronger." "I'm becoming myself," Clara said, maybe for the first time. Neshoba reached into his shirt and drew out the red silk. Clara had given it back to him a week ago, saying he should keep it safe. Now he unfolded it carefully, the fabric whispering like secrets in the dark. "My mother gave this to me as she died," he said. "She told me to find someone worth protecting, someone worth the sacrifice." He stepped closer, draping the silk across Clara's shoulders. "I thought I was protecting you because of a debt, because of honor, but that's not why anymore." Clara's breath caught. "Why then?" "Because you chose to stay, because you're brave enough to become who you were meant to be, because when I think about tomorrow, I want you in it." His fingers lingered on the silk at her collarbone. "In my people's way, when a man gives a woman his mother's token, it means she is truly his wife, not in obligation, in choice. "I choose you," Clara whispered. The words felt like a door opening, like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. Nashoba's kiss was gentle, reverent, nothing like the brutal claiming she'd once feared. His hand cradled her face as if she were something precious, and Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. Not from sadness this time, but from relief, from joy, from the stunning realization that love could exist even in the midst of so much loss. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in red silk and starlight, believing for one perfect moment that the world might let them keep this happiness. Dawn came too soon. Clara woke to screaming, not the playful shrieks of children, but raw terror that cut through sleep like a blade. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and heard what came after the screams: gunfire. Nashoba was already moving, grabbing his rifle, shouting orders in Apache to the men stumbling from their dwellings. Clara ran to the entrance and saw chaos spilling across the canyon. Cavalry soldiers on horseback, their blue uniforms stark against red earth, firing into the village, driving people like cattle toward the center. "Stay inside," Nashoba commanded, but Clara wouldn't. She saw children running, confused and terrified, saw an old woman fall with blood spreading across her dress. She ran into the chaos, grabbing a little boy who'd frozen in panic, dragging him toward the stone outcropping where other women were herding the young and elderly. Bullets whined past her head. Someone screamed her name. The world had turned into smoke and noise and the copper smell of blood. Nashoba fought like something elemental, not savage, but precise, deadly, protecting his people with every ounce of strength he possessed. Clara saw him drop 2 soldiers who were advancing on a group of unarmed women, saw him take a rifle butt to the ribs and keep fighting. Then she saw the soldier behind him, rifle raised, aiming at Nashoba's unprotected back. No. Clara didn't think, just moved, threw herself between them. The soldier hesitated, startled by a white woman in Apache dress. That single second of confusion saved her life, but it cost Nashoba his freedom. He spun, saw her in danger, and made the choice any man in love would make. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "Don't shoot her," he said in perfect English, loud enough to cut through the chaos. "Take me instead." 3 soldiers swarmed him, chains appearing as if they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Clara fought her way toward him, screaming his name, but rough hands grabbed her, held her back. "Let her go," Nashoba commanded as they forced him to his knees. "She's not part of this." But Clara was part of it, was woven into every moment of it. She stopped struggling and went still, watching them chain the man she loved like an animal, watching blood drip from the cut above his eye. The gunfire ceased. The village that had been alive with cooking fires and laughter an hour ago now smoldered in ruins. Bodies lay scattered, the survivors huddled together, guarded by soldiers with rifles. A voice rang out across the canyon, sharp with authority. "Secure all hostiles. We're taking the warriors back for trial." Clara's head snapped up. That voice. She knew that voice, even though she hadn't heard it in a decade, even though it had deepened and hardened with time and distance. The commanding officer rode forward on a black horse, his face shadowed by his cavalry hat. When he pulled it off, Clara's world tilted sideways. James, her brother, her blood, the boy who disappeared when she was 9, leaving only a note that said he was going to make something of himself. He'd been 19 then, angry at their father, desperate to escape the suffocating poverty of Dust Creek. Now he was a lieutenant, a soldier, A man who'd just ordered the destruction of the only place Clara had ever felt free. "James," her voice cracked like breaking glass. He turned toward her, squinting through the smoke. She saw the exact moment recognition hit the way his face went slack with shock, then hardened into something she didn't recognize. "Clara!" He dismounted, striding toward her. "My God, Clara, you're alive. We heard the reports, said you'd been killed, taken by savages." "No!" Clara's voice was steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "I wasn't taken. I chose to stay." James looked at her properly then, at her Apache dress, at the red silk still tied in her hair, at her hands, calloused now from work and weapons. His expression shifted from relief to horror. "What have they done to you?" "They gave me a home," Clara said. "They gave me a family. They kidnapped you, manipulated you." James reached for her arm, but she jerked away. "Don't worry, sister. You're safe now. We'll get you back to civilization. Get you help." "The only one who needs help is you if you think I'm leaving with you." James's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're saying. You've been traumatized. These people are more honorable than anyone in Dust Creek ever was." Clara's voice rose. "That man you just chained, he's my husband. And if you take him, you'll have to take me too." Silence fell like a stone. James stared at her. His soldiers stared at her. Even Neshoba, kneeling in chains, looked at her with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. "Your husband," James repeated slowly. "You married an Apache. I chose him, the same way you chose to leave us." The blow landed. Clara saw it in the way James flinched, in the tightening of his mouth. But he recovered quickly, his officer's mask sliding back into place. "Sergeant, take the prisoners to the wagons. We move out in 10 minutes. He looked at Clara one last time. "You're coming with us. That's an order. You can't order me. I'm not your soldier. No, you're my sister, and I'm not leaving you here." James signaled to 2 soldiers. "Escort Miss Whitmore to my tent. Keep her there until we're ready to depart." "James, no." But the soldiers were already moving, hands firm on her arms, pulling her away from Neshoba. She fought them, screaming, watching Neshoba being dragged in the opposite direction. Their eyes met across the burning village, and Clara saw what he wasn't saying. "Run! Save yourself! Let me go!" She would do no such thing. As they forced her into James's command tent, Clara made herself a promise. They could chain her brother, drag him back to whatever fate awaited Apache prisoners. But she would not abandon him, would not betray the vows she'd made in Silk and Starlight City. If they were taking Neshoba to his death, they'd have to kill her too, outside. She heard James give the order to move out, heard the creak of wagon wheels, heard the soft, defeated weeping of Apache women watching their men being taken away. And somewhere in that caravan of prisoners, chained and bleeding, but alive, rode the man Clara had chosen to love. She pressed her hand against the tent wall and whispered into the canvas, "I'm coming for you. I swear it." Then she started planning how to make good on that promise. Clara waited until the camp settled into night watch before she moved. James had posted guards outside his tent, but they were watching for threats from outside, not from within. She slipped through the back canvas while they stood at attention, melting into shadows with the skills Neshoba had taught her. The horse she stole was her own, the mare Neshoba had trained for her. Recognizing Clara's touch even in darkness, she swung into the saddle without a sound, the red silk ribbon wrapped tight around her shoulders like armor, like a promise. Then she rode 40 miles back to Dusk Creek. 8 hours if she pushed hard. The moon lit her path across the desert, turning familiar landmarks into ghostly monuments. Clara leaned low over the mare's neck, letting the rhythm of hoofbeats drown out fear. She thought of Neshoba's hands teaching hers how to string a bow, his voice reading Shakespeare by firelight, the way he'd looked at her that last night, silk falling across her shoulders, his eyes holding everything he couldn't say aloud. "I choose you," she whispered to the desert wind. "I choose you, and I'm not letting them take that away." The memories came unbidden as she rode, Neshoba laughing when she'd finally hit a target after 100 misses, his patient corrections when she'd struggled with the Apache words for stars, for home, for love. The night he'd told her about his mother, his voice breaking just once before he steadied it again. He'd given her freedom when she had none, had offered choice when the world demanded she accept her cage, had loved her without conditions, without expectations, without the crushing weight of ownership. Now it was her turn. The mare's breathing grew labored as they climbed the rocky trail toward town. Clara's thighs burned, her hands blistered where the reins cut into her palms. But she didn't slow, couldn't slow. Somewhere behind her, in a military prison wagon, Neshoba was being dragged toward death, and every second counted. "He gave me freedom," Clara said aloud, needing to hear the words, "Now I give him mine." The desert didn't answer, just stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and brutal and utterly indifferent to human suffering. Clara rode harder. In the darkness of the prison wagon, Neshoba pressed his face against the bars and tried to breathe through the pain. They'd beaten him methodically. After loading him up, nothing that would kill, just enough to remind him he was less than human in their eyes. His ribs screamed with each breath. Blood crusted over one eye. The chains bit into his wrists until he couldn't feel his fingers anymore. But he didn't make a sound, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, he sang quietly under his breath, the song his mother had sung while she died. The words were Apache, speaking of courage and sacrifice, and the circle that brings all things back to the beginning. The other prisoners in the wagon listened, some joining in with voices rough from screaming. Neshoba closed his eyes and thought of Clara, prayed she'd been smart enough to run, to take the horse and money he'd hidden for her and disappear into a new life, somewhere they'd never find her. She could pass for a settler's widow, could start over. The thought should have brought comfort. Instead, it felt like dying. He'd known this would end badly from the start, had known the moment he agreed to protect Samuel's daughter that he was inviting catastrophe. White women didn't marry Apache warriors and live happily ever after. The world didn't work that way. History didn't allow it. But God, for a few weeks, he'd let himself believe differently, had let himself imagine a future where Clara's laughter filled their home, where children grew up speaking both languages, where two worlds could meet without bloodshed. Foolish. He'd been foolish. The wagon hit a rut, jolting him hard against the bars. Pain exploded through his broken ribs. Neshoba bit down on his tongue until he tasted copper, but still didn't cry out. At dawn, they'd reach Dust Creek. By noon, he'd hang. His father would lose another son. His people would lose another warrior. And Clara would be free to forget she'd ever loved him. It was better this way, cleaner. She deserved a life without the weight of his choices dragging her down. Nashoba sang louder, letting the words carry him away from fear, away from regret, toward whatever came next. If he had to die, he'd do it with his mother's song on his lips and Clara's name in his heart. That would have to be enough. Clara reached the military encampment outside Dust Creek as the first light touched the horizon. The guards recognized her immediately. Samuel Whitmore's daughter. Everyone knew her, but their expressions when they saw her Apache dress and the red silk in her hair ranged from shock to disgust. "I need to see Lieutenant Whitmore," she said, dismounting. "Now, miss, you can't just—" "He's my brother. Get him, or I'll walk through this camp screaming until he comes out himself." The guard's face paled. He disappeared into the command tent while Clara stood there, trembling with exhaustion and determination, refusing to let her knees buckle. James emerged moments later, his hair disheveled, eyes red from lack of sleep. When he saw her, relief and fury warred across his features. "Clara, thank God, I thought you had been—" He stopped, really looking at her, at the dirt on her face, the sweat-soaked dress, the wild, desperate light in her eyes. "How did you get here?" "I rode." Clara stepped closer. "Where is he? James, where's Nashoba?" James's expression hardened. "In the stockade, where he belongs." "He belongs with me." Clara's voice didn't waver. "Release him." "I can't do that." "Yes, you can. You're the commanding officer. You have authority. I have orders." James grabbed her shoulders, and Clara saw something break in his face. "Don't you understand? This isn't some game. Clara, that man is an enemy combatant. He attacked United States soldiers. He defended his home, his people. What would you do if someone came and—" "He's Apache," James said, as if that explained everything, as if it justified anything. "They're savages. Clara, they've killed hundreds of settlers, butchered families. You can't possibly—" Clara slapped him, hard. The crack echo across the camp. "He's my husband," she said quietly, "and he's twice the man you are." James touched his reddening cheek, something like pain flickering behind his anger. "I thought you were dead. When I left, when I joined up, I told myself it was to make something of myself, to stop being the poor drunk son from nowhere. But really, I was running from Pa, from responsibility, from you. And now you're standing here defending one of them, and I don't even know who you are anymore." "I am someone who learned what honor actually means," Clara said. "Not blind obedience to orders, not hatred dressed up as duty, real honor, the kind that costs something." "You think I don't know about cost," James' voice cracked. "I left my family. I watched good men die. I followed every order, did everything right. And for what? So I could come back and find my sister turned into something I don't recognize. Or maybe you came back and found I'm finally who I was always meant to be." Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Please, James, I know you're angry. I know you don't understand. but he's going to hang at noon unless you stop it. My husband, the man I love, the only person who ever gave me real freedom." James looked away. "The orders come from above me, Clara, from Colonel Morrison. He wants to make an example, stop the Apache raids for good." "There were no raids. Sheriff Hayes fabricated the reports to justify stealing Apache land. I can prove it. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter now. The wheels are already in motion." "Then stop them." Clara grabbed his arm. "Desperate. You're not a machine, James. You're my brother. You can choose to do the right thing." "The right thing?" James laughed bitterly. "I don't even know what that is anymore. Orders are orders. Clara, if I disobey, I'll be court-martialed. Everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed, everything you've built on the graves of innocent people," Clara finished. "Is that really what you want your life to mean?" James pulled away from her, his face a mask of anguish. "I can't save him. I'm sorry, but I can't. If you stay, you'll only make this harder." "Go back to town. Start over. Forget this ever happened." Clara stared at her brother, this stranger, wearing her brother's face, and felt something inside her turn to steel. "Then you're not my brother anymore," she said. "My brother died the day he chose orders over family, over decency, over love." She turned and walked away, leaving James standing alone in the growing light, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. If he wouldn't help her, she'd do this alone. Clara had 8 hours until noon. 8 hours to find another way. 8 hours to save the man who'd saved her first. She wrapped the red silk tighter around her shoulders and started planning a rescue that would either set them both free or kill them both. Trying either way. She wasn't walking away. Not now. Not ever. Clara returned to the inn for the first time since her father's death. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Red Hawk's men had already been through, taking anything of value, leaving destruction in their wake. Furniture overturned, dishes smashed. Her mother's china ground into the floorboards, but they'd missed the hiding place. Clara knelt by her father's desk, feeling along the underside until her fingers found the secret compartment he'd shown her when she was 12. The latch clicked. A small drawer slid open, revealing a leather-bound journal she'd never seen before. Samuel's diary. Her hand shook as she opened it, and her father's familiar handwriting swam before her eyes. The entries started 3 years ago, when the sickness first took root in his lungs. Page after page of fear, not for himself, but for Clara. What would happen to her when he was gone? Who would protect her in a town full of men who saw women as property? Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. I wrote to Delson today, asked if his son would honor the debt. I know what I'm asking is impossible, unthinkable. A white girl and an Apache warrior? The world will call it madness. But I've seen Neshoba. I know his character, and I trust no white man in this territory enough to leave Clara in their care, at least with Neshoba. I know she'll be protected. At least with him she might be free. Clara's breath caught. Her father had known, had planned this from the beginning, had deliberately chosen Neshoba, not in spite of what he was, but because of it. The entries continued, growing more detailed. Samuel writing about his meetings with Neshoba, about the young warrior's reluctance to accept, his insistence that Clara must have a choice, that he wouldn't force anything, about Samuel's growing certainty that this was the right path, even if it meant lying to his daughter. I'm asking Neshoba to marry her. Though I haven't told Clara that part yet, I've couched it in terms of protection, of guardianship. I'm a coward. But if I tell her the truth that I'm asking her to marry an Apache, she'll refuse out of fear, out of prejudice I've helped instill. Better she discovers who he is after she's safe. Better she learns to see him as I do, as a man of honor. Tears blurred the words. Clara wiped them away angrily, reading on. Neshoba asked for nothing in return, not the land, not the water rights, not even money. He said the debt his father owed was enough. But I insisted, gave him everything, $3,000 in gold, every deed I own. He took it only after I threatened to give it all to the bank instead. Said he'd use it to buy peace for his people, to buy time before the inevitable war comes. He's trying to save everyone. I'm only trying to save my daughter. Perhaps that makes me selfish, but I can't find it in myself to care. The final entry was dated the night before Samuel died. Tomorrow, I tell Clara about the arrangement. I won't tell her everything. Can't. If I reveal that her husband is Apache before she meets him, she'll run, so I'll lie one last time. Paint Neshoba as a white businessman. Let her discover the truth herself. Maybe she'll hate me for it. Maybe she's right to. But I'd rather she hate me and live than love me and die. That's what being a father means. Making the choices your children can't. Bearing the weight so they don't have to. Forgive me, Clara. Forgive me for everything except loving you too much to let you face this world alone. Clara closed the journal, pressing it against her chest. All this time she'd thought her father had betrayed her, had sold her to a stranger. But he'd given her the greatest gift. He knew how protect her, who valued her freedom above all else. A man who would die before he hurt her. Samuel hadn't betrayed her. He'd saved her in the only way he could. I understand now, Papa. Clara whispered to the empty room. I understand. But understanding wasn't enough. She needed proof. Evidence that would force the military to see what was really happening. Clara stood, tucking the journal into her dress, and headed for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Hayes's office sat at the end of Main Street, a squat wooden building that smelled of tobacco and corruption. The door was locked, but Clara had learned things in the Apache village, had learned that locks were just another kind of lie, waiting to be exposed. She jimmied the window with a knife. Slipping into as dawn light filtered through dirty glass. The office was chaos papers scattered across every surface. Empty whiskey bottles lined up like soldiers. A map of the territory pinned to the wall with red circles marking locations. Clara moved to the desk, rifling through documents with growing urgency. Bills of sale for land that didn't belong to Hayes, correspondence with Colonel Morrison at the fort, and then, buried under a stack of wanted posters, she found it, a telegram from 3 weeks ago. Need justification for land seizure. Stop reports of Apache raids will suffice. Stop coordinate with local authorities. Stop priority acquisition Canyon territory. Stop gold survey confirms. Viable deposit stop. Clara's hands clenched around the paper. Gold. This was all about gold. Hayes had manufactured evidence of Apache raids to justify military intervention, had gotten Morrison to attack the village so they could seize land rich with ore. Neshoba's people weren't criminals. They were obstacles to profit. She kept searching, finding more damning evidence, forged reports of stolen cattle, fake witness statements, even a rough map showing planned mining operations in the canyon where Neshoba's village had stood. "I knew you'd come back here eventually," Clara spun. Sheriff Hayes filled the doorway, his hand resting casually on his gun. "You're a persistent little thing, aren't you?" Hayes stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Your daddy was the same way. Couldn't leave well enough alone. Kept asking questions, making noise. That's why I made sure Red Hawk's boys scared him good. Figured the old man would die quiet after that." "You killed him," Clara said flatly. "The sickness killed him. I just expedited the process." Hayes smiled. "Now you're going to give me those papers, and we're going to forget this ever happened. Or I'll tell everyone how Samuel's daughter went savage, how she helped the Apache raid our town, how she needs to hang right alongside that animal she married." Clara's mind raced. She couldn't fight him, couldn't run, but she could stall. "The military won't believe you, she said. "My brother—" "Your brother does what he's told, always has, follows orders like a good little soldier. He won't save you. Clara, no one will." "You're wrong." The voice came from behind Hayes. The sheriff turned, and Clara saw James standing in the doorway, his face pale but resolute. "I've been listening outside for the past 5 minutes," James said quietly. "Heard everything. The conspiracy, the manufactured evidence, all of it." Hayes laughed. "And what are you going to do about it? Lieutenant, report me? Who do you think approved this operation? Who do you think wants that gold?" "Colonel Morrison," James said. "I know. I've been following his orders without question for years, believing I was serving justice, serving my country." His hands clenched into fists. "I was serving greed." "Welcome to the real world, boy. Now step aside," before James drew his sidearm, aiming it steady at Hayes's chest. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder. Drop your weapon." For a moment, Clara thought Hayes would fight, saw him calculating odds, weighing options. Then his shoulders slumped, and he let his gun fall to the floor. "This won't change anything," Hayes said. "Morrison has too much power. You'll be court-martialed for this." "Maybe," James agreed. "But I'll be court-martialed for doing the right thing. That's worth something." He looked at Clara over Hayes's shoulder, and she saw her brother again, the boy who'd left 10 years ago, searching for honor. Maybe he'd finally found it. But there was still more she needed to know, more truth to uncover. Clara left James securing Hayes and ran toward the stockade where the Apache prisoners were being held. She had to see Neshoba's father, had to understand the final piece of this puzzle. Delson sat alone in a cell separate from the other prisoners, his weathered face calm despite the chains on his wrists. When he saw Clara, recognition flickered in his eyes. "Samuel's daughter," he said in accented English. "You have his eyes." Clara gripped the bars. "Tell me about Neshoba. Tell me the truth." Delson studied her for a long moment. Then he began to speak. "My son was born to lead our people. First son, strongest warrior, wisest counselor. When he became a man, the elders named him my successor. He would have been a great chief." Delson's voice carried old grief. "Then your father came to us, dying, desperate, begging us to honor the debt we owed. What did he ask for? Everything my son was Delsin met her eyes. Nashoba gave up his birthright, left our village for 3 years, went into the mountains alone and hunted, trapped, saved every piece of gold he could find. $3,000, 5 years of work compressed into 3. He nearly died twice, starved himself to save money, broke his body in ways that will never fully heal. Clara's chest constricted. Why would he do that? Because your father asked only for protection. But Nashoba wanted to give you choice. Freedom. He knew you'd never accept help from an Apache out of anything but desperation. So he paid your father's debts himself. Made it so you'd owe him nothing. So whatever you chose would be real. Tears streamed down Clara's face. He sacrificed everything. Not everything, Delsin said softly. He gained you. And in my son's eyes, that made every sacrifice worth it. He wanted you to choose him for who he was, not what he gave up. That's why he never told you. I have to save him, Clara whispered. Then you must be as brave as he believes you are. Delsin reached through the bars, his chained hands finding hers. My son loved you enough to die for you. Now you must love him enough to live for him, to fight when fighting seems impossible, to stand when the world demands you kneel. Clara squeezed his hands, understanding flowing between them. Two people from different worlds, united by love for the same impossible man. I will, she promised. I'll bring him home. Delsin smiled, and it transformed his weathered face. You already are home, daughter. Now go claim it. Clara ran from the stockade with her father's journal, Hayes's evidence, and the truth of Nashoba's sacrifice burning in her heart. 3 revelations that changed everything. 3 truths that made her choice crystal clear. The town square was already filling with people, drawn by the promise of a hanging. The gallows stood stark against the morning sky, a noose swaying in the desert wind. Clara wrapped the red silk around her shoulders and walked toward her destiny. It was time to make the whole town listen. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the town square. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, watching soldiers drag Nashoba toward the gallows. His face was bruised, blood crusted on his temple, but he walked with his head high, unbroken. Their eyes met across the distance. She saw him shake his head slightly, a warning, a plea. Run, his eyes said. Save yourself. Clara stepped forward instead. The red silk ribbon fluttered around her shoulders as she walked through the crowd. People moved aside, whispering, their faces twisted with shock and disgust. A white woman in Apache dress, Samuel Whitmore's daughter, turned savage. The town scandal made flesh. Let them stare. Let them judge. She didn't care anymore. Stop, Clara's voice cut through the murmuring. Stop this right now. The Colonel Morrison turned from where he stood near the gallows, irritation crossing his weathered features. Miss Whitmore, this is military business. Return to your home. This is murder, Clara said, louder now, and I won't let you disguise it as justice. 50 rifles turned toward her, 50 soldiers waiting for orders. The crowd held its breath. Clara climbed the gallows steps, positioning herself between Nashoba and the noose. This close, she could see the chains cutting into his wrists, the way he trembled despite his straight spine, could smell blood and sweat and fear. He's my husband, she said, her voice carrying across the square. "Shoot me first." The words echoed in the sudden silence. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman gasped, a man cursed, but Clara kept her eyes on Morrison, watching the colonel's face harden. "Miss Whitmore, step aside. That's an order." "I am not your soldier." Clara pulled her father's journal from her dress, holding it high. "And I have proof that this entire operation is a fraud." Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm. "You're hysterical, traumatized. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Clara opened the journal, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "My father documented everything. His arrangement with Neshoba, the debt that started it all, how an Apache chief named Delson saved his life 10 years ago when white men tried to murder him for his supplies." She saw faces in the crowd shift, uncertainty replacing certainty. Good, let them doubt. "Neshoba didn't kidnap me, didn't force me. He married me to honor his father's debt, to protect me when my father died, and left me with nothing but creditors and threats." Clara's voice grew stronger. "He gave up everything to keep that promise. Did you know he was supposed to be a chief? That he walked away from his birthright to earn enough gold to pay my father's debts. 3 years in the mountains, 3 years of starvation and suffering, all so I could have a choice." "Touching story," Morrison said coldly. "But it doesn't change the fact that Apache raiders have been terrorizing this region for months." "There were no raids." Clara pulled out the telegrams she'd taken from Hayes's office. "Sheriff Hose fabricated the reports. He and you conspired to manufacture evidence so the military could seize Apache land with gold deposits worth thousands of dollars." Morrison's face went white, then red. "Those are forgeries. Lies are told by a girl who's been brainwashed." "Read them." Clara threw the papers into the crowd. "Read them and see for yourselves. This was never about justice or safety. It was about greed, about stealing from people who had every right to defend their home." People scrambled for the telegrams, passing them hand to hand. Clara watched realization spread like wildfire through the crowd, saw doubt become anger, saw anger become something that might be the beginning of shame. "Even if that's true," someone shouted from the crowd, "he's still an Apache, still a savage. He's twice the man any of you are." Clara's voice cracked. "You call him savage. He read Shakespeare by firelight, taught me to survive, treated me with more respect than any white man in this town ever has. He gave me freedom when you would have caged me. He protected me when you abandoned me. And you want to hang him for having the audacity to defend his people from soldiers who came to massacre them." She turned, looking out at faces she'd known her whole life. Neighbors who'd bought drinks at her father's inn, women who'd taught her embroidery in church, men who'd promised to watch out for her after Samuel died. Not one of them had kept that promise. "I was forced into this marriage," Clara said quietly. "My father arranged it without my consent. I was terrified, angry. I thought my life was over. But Neshoba gave me something none of you ever did the right to choose, to stay or leave, to accept or refuse, and I chose him, not because I had to, because I wanted to." Neshoba's voice came from behind her, rough and low. "Clara, don't, please. They'll kill you too." She reached back without looking, her fingers finding his chained hands. "Then they'll kill us both. I'm not letting you go." "This is insanity," Morrison sputtered. "Lieutenant Whitmore, remove your sister immediately." James stepped forward from the ranks of soldiers. For a moment, Clara thought he'd follow orders again. thought she'd lost him to duty one final time. Then he raised his voice. "No, sir, I won't." Morrison whirled. "What did you say?" "I said no." James moved to stand beside Clara, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "I've been following orders my whole military career, doing what I was told without question. But my sister's right. This is murder dressed up as justice, and I won't be part of it. You'll hang for insubordination. Better to hang for the right reasons than live for the wrong ones." James looked at Clara, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry I was late, sister, but I'm here now." The crowd murmured louder now, arguments breaking out, some demanding the hanging proceed, others questioning, wavering. Then an old woman pushed through the press of bodies. Ruth Brennan, who'd lived in Dust Creek longer than anyone, who'd lost her husband to Apache arrows 20 years ago, who had every reason to hate. She climbed the gallows steps slowly, her aged joints protesting. When she reached Clara, she stood between the girl and the rifles. "I'm tired," Ruth said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet, "tired of hate, tired of pretending revenge makes anything better. My son rode with the cavalry 5 years ago. He was part of the unit that massacred Neshoba's village, killed his mother while she tried to protect her children." Ruth's voice broke. "My son told me before he died, told me what they did, how they shot unarmed women, burned homes with people still inside. He couldn't live with it. Put a bullet in his own head rather than carry that weight." She turned to face the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My boy died because of this cycle, because we teach our children that some lives matter less than others, that it's acceptable to kill if the skin is different enough. And I won't," her voice rose, fierce, despite the trembling, "I will not let another young person die for our sins. If you're going to hang this man, you'll have to hang me too, because I'm done choosing hate." The square fell silent. Clara felt Neshoba's hands tighten around hers, felt James's solid presence at her side, felt Ruth's courage radiating like heat. "Anyone else?" Clara called out. "Anyone else tired of bloodshed, tired of lies? Anyone else brave enough to say enough?" For a long moment, nothing. Then a farmer stepped forward, then a shopkeeper, then a woman holding a child's hand. One by one, people moved toward the gallows. Not everyone, not even most. But enough to matter. Morrison looked around wildly, seeing his support crumbling. "This is mutiny. I'll have you all court-martialed, arrested." "On what charges?" James demanded. "Following the law, exposing corruption. You conspired with Sheriff Hayes to manufacture evidence and steal land. That's the real crime here." "You have no proof." "We have Hayes in custody," James said calmly. "And he's already confessing, trying to save himself by implicating you. It's over, Colonel." Morrison's hand dropped to his weapon, and for one terrible moment Clara thought he'd start shooting, thought this would end in blood regardless. Then Sheriff Hayes was dragged into the square in chains, and Morrison seemed to deflate. The fight went out of him all at once. "Release the prisoner," Morrison said quietly. A soldier moved forward with keys, unlocking Neshoba's chains. They fell to the ground with a clatter that sounded like freedom. Neshoba stood there, swaying slightly, free for the first time in days. His eyes found Clara's, and everything he couldn't say aloud lived in that look. gratitude, love, disbelief that she'd actually done it. Clara threw her arms around him, not caring who watched, not caring what they had thought. She'd stood before 50 rifles and won, had faced down her own brothers and the entire military, had chosen love over safety, truth over comfort. "You came for me," Neshoba whispered against her hair. "You gave me freedom." Clara whispered back, "Now I've given you yours." The crowd began to disperse, some angry, some thoughtful, all forever changed by what they'd witnessed. The town hadn't transformed overnight. Clara knew that. Prejudice didn't evaporate with one speech. Fear didn't disappear with one act of courage. But seeds had been planted. Questions had been raised. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start something new. James approached them hesitantly. "I'm resigning my commission. Probably going to face charges for this." "Then you'll face them with family," Clara said, reaching for his hand. "Welcome home, brother." 10 years passed like water through open fingers. Clara and Neshoba never returned to live in Dust Creek, nor did they stay entirely in the Apache village. Instead, they built a home between two worlds, a small ranch where the desert met the foothills, where anyone was welcome, regardless of the color of their skin. Their daughter, Emma, grew up speaking both English and Apache. Her laughter, a bridge between cultures that had been at war. James visited often, no longer a soldier, but a blacksmith, his hands building instead of destroying. Ruth Brennan lived long enough to hold Emma as a baby, whispering that forgiveness was the bravest thing she'd ever done. The town never fully accepted them. Some neighbors remained hostile, clinging to old hatreds like lifelines. But others, slowly, carefully, began to change, began to see that love didn't follow the rules they'd been taught. Every year on the anniversary of Samuel's death, Clara placed the red silk ribbon on his grave. It had become her tradition, her way of saying thank you to the father who'd loved her enough to give her an impossible choice. Home wasn't where you were born. It was where you were brave enough to belong. And Clara had finally found hers. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes when we choose our own cage and then open the door for someone else. In this story, Clara discovered that true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but finding someone worth fighting for. Her father's final gift wasn't just protection. It was the chance to choose her own path, even when that path terrified her. What's one moment in your life when you had to choose between safety and what your heart knew was right? Have you ever had to stand up for someone when the whole world was against them? Share your story in the comments below. Your courage might inspire someone else who's facing their own impossible choice today. Let's remind each other that it's never too late to choose love over fear, and that the bravest thing we can do is stand up for what matters, even when we stand alone